Coming to you from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, it's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervilla, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Stacy, today we talk about hanging baskets. It's Mother's Day weekend, and so hanging baskets are kind of a big deal. They were a big deal, I guess, to King Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon way back when, the famous hanging gardens where allegedly hanging baskets got their start. May baskets were a big deal back in the 1800s and 1900s. People would fill little baskets with candies and cut flowers and hang them on the doorknob of their neighbor.
That's a tradition we should bring back. That's quite lovely.
I think we should. Exactly. And then, of course, the Saturday before Mother's Day in garden centers is considered basket day because, well, what are you going to get for mom? And a hanging basket, of course, is a great gift idea. One flower that sticks out in my mind, because when I first started out in the garden center industry years ago, we would sell all kinds of them, still do today, but it made a great Mother's Day hanging basket, and that is fuchsias.
Oh, yep. Classic choice. And, attracts hummingbirds. So if mom likes hummingbirds, can't go wrong with a fuchsia. Although, I will say, I did buy my mom fuchsia hanging baskets for many years, and she didn't love them because they needed deadheading.
Oh, okay.
So even though they did attract hummingbirds, and that was great. And also, depending on where you live, if it gets really hot in the summer, they will kind of slow down.
Yes.
And not be as fabulous. But I'll tell you, fuchsia flowers are some of the prettiest flowers, and the colors are just irresistible.
Yeah, if you can give them a little bit of shade, you can get upright and pendulating. There's a cultivar out called Blackie Midnight. Have a picture for our YouTube viewers of that. There's eruptions, all different types of fuchsia cultivars. And then, of course, I also love begonia baskets. You can get tuberous, fibrous, rex begonias, pendulating begonias. Begonia foliage, by the way, if you're growing them in a hanging basket, are notorious for deflecting irrigation water. You think you're watering that basket, but it's deflecting off the foliage. And then, of course, angel wing begonias also have become very popular over the past few years.
So like bonfire and all of those fabulous choices. Bright colors, though, on bonfire, which I actually love. But bright orange also attracts hummingbirds.
Yes, exactly. Now, when you purchase a hanging basket or give one to mom, most hanging baskets you'll find in garden centers come in a plastic 10-inch hanging basket.
I'm going to give that a thumbs down.
Same here.
Because I don't buy that kind for my mom.
And so what I want you to do, and that's fabulous, your mom is lucky. What I want to do is just point out to people that there's nothing wrong with upsizing those. In other words, I view those 10-inch poly baskets as a delivery container, similar to how you would go to the grocery store and, let's say, buy Cool Whip. Okay?
Yeah.
Cool Whip, invented
the
in the 1960s. To this day, we still do not know what non-dairy Cool Whip is made of, but that's a whole other story. I like Cool Whip containers because I can store nuts and bolts and nails and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So what do you do with that 10-inch hanging basket? Because I like to upsize into a 12-inch, 14-inch, or 16-inch basket, maybe a sphagnum moss basket, or just go online and look. There are a multitude of great 12 to 16-inch size baskets that you can purchase to upsize your hanging basket.
Right, and upscale it. I think that's really important, too, because, that plastic container in most scenarios where you're hanging a hanging basket, that container is like right at eye level.
Yes.
So you're looking not at this fabulous plant, but this kind of junky, white, molded with like these weird waves, kind of containers. And I understand that's the lowest cost for garden centers, and that's why they do that. But I always do prefer to get my mom a bigger hanging basket that's in more of the moss type, or even the cardboard, the cord fiber, that pressed cord fiber. Even that, just something that looks a little bit more organic, so that while the hanging basket is growing out, and most do eventually grow out, that's kind of why they're hanging baskets, because they're big plants that are going to overgrow the basket in time. It just looks a little, more organic and nice. But I think it's a great idea to invest in really high quality hanging baskets, which aren't going to cost that much, that go with your decor of your home and that you can plant into every single year. And that's always going to look a lot nicer. And that's a good way to save the money by buying the inexpensive plastic hanging basket, but give it more of that upscale look.
Exactly how I feel. And then when you do that, make sure to use a good quality, lightweight potting mix or soil where you can upsize into that basket. You could consider using soil moist granules, just a few granules in the soil to help hold the moisture in, because one of the key aspects of hanging baskets, if you're buying one of these 10-inch hanging baskets and hanging that thing up, is that as the season progresses, the root system develops and creates a firm or solid surface along the top. Also, if the soil dries a little bit, it contracts away from the side of the pot. Then you're watering that pot. It's running across the surface, down the sides, and not getting the root ball wet.
Never really saturating it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when growing hanging baskets, I love to just walk along and lift up on them, tell by the weight of the basket whether or not it needs moisture. And I like to keep a screwdriver handy because I just puncture some holes to basically cut into that surface tension. And Stacy, you're going to have a lot easier job watering your hanging baskets.
Absolutely. And, for anyone who is listening, who is getting this into their head, for the love of your mother or anyone else important in your life, do not put a diaper in a hanging basket in an attempt to make it hold more water. No matter what you've seen on Pinterest or any other social media site, any parent can tell you that a diaper is intended to hold on to moisture and not release it. And that is exactly what's going to happen in your hanging basket. Is you're going to have a really gross, dirty diaper that is just full of soil and water that is not doing anything for your plant except actually taking away space that could have been soil that could have actually helped it. So no matter what you've read, and I tell you, off topic, but I feel like the misinformation on social media right now is just going through like wildfire. It's
nuts.
Just, we are in the season. So don't believe everything that you hear. And please, if you are repotting a hanging basket, do not put a diaper in it.
That's right. Instead, you should pamper your baskets. That's what
exactly. That's a good idea.
Coming up in segment 4 today, we will talk about plants that are great in hanging baskets, because I think you should pot up your own hanging baskets. Combinations are great. Proven Winners on their website has countless recipes that you can tap into, where you take 2 or 3 different types of plants and plant them. Some of them quite simple. I love the Vista View recipe. I use it every year. It's just 3 different types of supertunias, including the bubblegum supertunia, but boy, do they perform as a hanging basket. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about, on a different subject, tulips and the different types of tulips. Now that they're in bloom, you can see the different types of tulips that you could grow in your garden. We'll also talk about that in segment 4 today. While we're on this subject of hanging baskets, and I think this is a subject, Stacy, that probably you and I both have very strong opinions on. Let me give you a limerick that I wrote about hanging baskets. It's called The Basket Case. My baskets hang around my place, hung without enough head space. Be very careful where you tread. You're liable to bonk your head and become a basket case. So if your head you clobber, take some aspirin for that throbber. Don't be upset, get a grip, because that basket is next going to drip on your clean white shirt. It will slobber. Again, having worked in the garden center industry for years, Stacy, I wish I had a dime for every time I've walked into a hanging basket or bonked my head on one.
Oh, yeah. Or that feeling when it drips down and it goes right down the back of your neck and down your shirt. That is not good. So all of that is to say, at home, if you're having guests or you're planning to hang out on your patio or porch later in the day, do the watering in the morning. let them drain through and avoid that whole mess.
Yes, and another suggestion, get yourself a good watering wand. So if you are not installing drip irrigation on these hanging baskets, get a good quality watering wand. And the very first thing you do, at least I do, is I take that watering wand, I pull out the cheap washer that's in there, and I put in a good quality rubber washer, because there's nothing worse than holding that watering wand up and having that water run right down your arm, into your armpits, down your side, and it's cold and it's miserable.
Yeah, and a hanging basket watering wand is a life changer. Like if you don't have one, you will not believe how much easier it is to care for that. So if you are looking to up your Mother's Day gift game, maybe think about that hanging basket watering wand instead of just the hanging basket. If you feel like, hey, too many hanging baskets, I'm getting Mom a watering wand this year, she will so appreciate it.
I love it. Put a bow on it. Stacy's next with Plants on Trial here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, plant peeps, and welcome.
Keep rolling. We're going to use this.
Okay, sorry.
Easter is over.
I've been thinking about trying to change up my greeting, and I've been puzzling over it. And I was like, is this going to be the day? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to give it a whirl. And it obviously did not feel natural. So greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where for the time being, I will be sticking with my traditional welcoming greeting, obviously.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day to my wonderful mom and to moms everywhere. And, we're talking about hanging baskets because it is a classic gift. And I think one of the reasons that a hanging basket is such a classic gift for mom is because they do tend to be a little bit more expensive.
Yes.
And whether or not your mom really considers herself a gardener, it is a little bit, especially a big, nice one, is a bit of a splurge.
But they're grab and go. It's easy. Pick out a couple nice ones, grab and go, one in each hand. And that's why we talked about in the first segment. That's wonderful. It's a delivery container. But think about upsizing.
Well, and the other part of it too is that you're not giving mom work. Now, some of our moms are gardeners and are happy to, get a bunch of fabulous Proven Winners annuals and get to work planting them in their planters and pots or whatever. But a lot of them are not, and they want something beautiful. And that's the great thing is it's a grab and go. You give that hanging basket to mom, you hang it up on the hanger for her, and your work there is done, and she gets to enjoy a fabulous hanging basket all season long. Now, obviously, this show is primarily about Proven Winners Color Choice shrubs. So we do have a vested interest in Proven Winners. But I will say, honestly, that when it comes to hanging baskets, Proven Winners plants in a hanging basket are usually pretty clearly denoted. They either have the tags in them or a special hanging basket tag. And, if this is your first time tuning in, it is really worth mentioning that all of the Proven Winners annuals, all of the Proven Winners plants in general, but this is especially important for Proven Winners annuals, and talking about hanging baskets, they are all tested to really outperform what is already on the market. So, we've talked numerous times about, say, Supertunia Vista Bubblegum Petunia, which is super popular, probably the best-selling Proven Winners annual. And the reason for that is because it doesn't need deadheading. So your mom might say, oh, I don't like petunias. They need deadheading. They smell terrible. Supertunia Vista Bubblegum doesn't need deadheading. So you're choosing plants that will actually perform better and bloom all summer for mom, and not just one of those ones that are going to peter out and then, your mom's like, well, that was a crummy hanging basket. So they really do make the better choice. I'm not just saying that because I work here. I'm saying that because I know the process and everything that goes into them.
Yeah, not only do the plants have great genetics, but the plants are tested, as you said. And even the recipes and the combinations are also tested and proven. And so you can proceed forward with confidence.
Yeah, and that's important too, because sometimes you get a fabulous looking hanging basket in May, and the plants don't all kind of grow at the same rate. And then some really important key element of it gets totally overwhelmed and it disappears. And you're like, oh, wait, wasn't there like this other plant in there? So they are really scientifically tested to make sure that all of the plants in there are compatible and will give you that nice, colorful look all season long. So it will look like what you bought, which is important. But when it comes to hanging baskets, shrubs, which we usually talk about here on Plants on Trial, not the first plant that comes to mind. If you stretch your imagination, you could say, okay, well, maybe like ivy. Ivy is, in theory, actually not in theory, ivy is a woody plant, though, of course, in hanging baskets, they don't ever really reach that point where they're actually putting on woody growth. That's probably as close as you could find, generally speaking, to any kind of shrub or woody plant, truly woody plant in a hanging basket. And over the years, we have definitely experimented with different plants in hanging baskets in our R&D facility, research and development, trying to find out if there are other plants that we can put in a hanging basket and, make that a more interesting way to kind of decorate and enjoy plants. And most of them have not been successful because, generally speaking, with these woody plants, they want to grow up. And so when you try to put them in a hanging basket, which you want to grow usually down and have that cascading effect, they won't do that. They'll just grow up and they'll try to cling to the basket hangers, and it just does not work out that well. But there is one major exception, and that is, one of them is today's plant on trial. The major exception, Fairy Trail Cascade hydrangeas.
Love that plant.
So you can kind of guess by the name right there, Trail and Cascade. These are hydrangeas that naturally grow with a very cascading, sort of trailing habit. And the first and original plant, which has actually already been a plant on trial, was Fairy Trail Bride Cascade hydrangea. And this was a plant on trial a little over a year ago. And it was the first one in the series. And this is a plant that was sold in the EU and the UK as Runaway Bride hydrangea. So Runaway Bride got a ton of notoriety because it won in 2018 the Chelsea Flower Show Plant of the Year. Okay. And people went bonkers for it. They had never seen anything like it. And it was not actually available in the U.S. until we were able to get the rights to it in about 2021, 2022. So it's a fairly recent plant to be available here in the U.S. And we're really thrilled about that. And, it is actually developed, some people might not know this, by Ushio Sakazaki, who is the same plant breeder who developed the Supertunia Vista series. So Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, all-time bestseller, Proven Winners Annual. Mm-hmm. He also developed Fairy Trail Bride. So it's got some serious chops with his talents behind it. So Fairy Trail Bride is a lace cap cascading hydrangeas. That's what we call them. We call them cascade hydrangeas because we really wanted to differentiate them from big leaf hydrangeas, Hydrangea macrophylla, because they are a bit different. So they look a lot like it, but there are some really key differences. So we really felt that to help communicate that to people and understand their different habits and need of care, that we should give them kind of a new category because they're a wide hybrid of different hydrangea species. So we call them cascade hydrangeas, which really goes to describe their habits. So instead of just growing upward and rounded like most hydrangeas do, it grows these long, arching, horizontal stems, and it sets flower buds at each individual leaf node along those stems. So it's almost like, and it's a little bit weird to say this, but it's almost like a viburnum, like a double file viburnum, wow. Which also looks like this in the spring, where you're getting that kind of, very distinctive look of the flowers kind of stacking along the stems.
Tiering.
Yes, tiering. Mm-hmm. So Fairy Trail Bride, like I said, is a lace cap. So the flowers are very large and open. Today's plant on trial, Fairy Trail White Cascade Hydrangea, is a mop head cascade hydrangea. So I personally am an equal opportunity hydrangea flower appreciator. I like both the mop heads and the lace caps. And in fact, if I did have a choice to live with only one for the rest of my life, I would actually choose the lace caps myself. I do prefer them. Yeah. But I get why people like the mop head, because those are the ones that are big and round and you just want to kind of like put your hands around because they're just so like fluffy. So Fairy Trail White Cascade Hydrangea is today's plant on trial, and that's what makes it really different. So when you see these plants side by side in the garden center, and there are going to be a lot of these in garden centers this Mother's Day, you'll really be able to decide which one you personally like better. There is also Fairy Trail Green Cascade Hydrangea, which is like Fairy Trail White in that it's a mop head, but the flowers are green, like that nice fresh green color.
It's exciting to think of growing something like this in a container or even a large basket. I was going to mention I have tried flowering shrubs in hanging baskets like Oh So Easy roses. Mm-hmm. But of course, these were hanging baskets that were packed with sphagnum moss, and they were 4 feet in diameter.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So
took a high-low to lift those things.
Yeah, and that's not really practical for most people. And many of these plants that you're going to see at your garden center at this time of year are actually going to be in hanging baskets because this plant does look absolutely beautiful in hanging baskets. So I did want to give you a little bit of information in case you are buying one of these for yourself or for your mom this year. They are really going to be very similar to growing a big leaf hydrangea. So they bloom on old wood, just like the big leaf hydrangeas do. So that means they set their flower buds in winter. And that means that they also are going to not need pruning. So it's a great plant to give as a gift because it's very low maintenance. But of course, there's going to be a tag in there that explains all of this. So don't worry, you can give it and you don't have to explain all of this extra information. So no pruning, blooms on old wood. It does bloom much earlier than big leaf hydrangeas do. So for us outdoors, it's going to bloom usually probably by about early June. Whereas, of course, in the garden center, they've already been forced to bloom because everyone wants to give their mom a beautiful plant that's already in flower. Mm-hmm. So don't be totally deceived by the bloom time, but they do bloom quite a bit earlier than the big leaf hydrangeas do. Now, there's one key difference that we really want everyone to know about these. Because they do bloom earlier than big leaf hydrangeas do, they are actually more susceptible to spring frost damage. So they bloom on old wood. They have their flower buds all through winter. Spring comes along, it starts to get warm, the plant starts to leaf out and open up those flower buds a little bit more. Because it is going to be so much more close to its bloom time than a big leaf hydrangea, it actually can make those flower buds a little bit more susceptible to cold damage even than a mac. So what we recommend for these is that you plant them in part sun only. And we actually recommend that part sun occur in the morning. Now, this might all sound oddly specific, but there's a good reason for it. And that is that when you plant it in that part sun for the morning, if a frost or freeze does occur, the frost or ice crystals will actually melt very slowly instead of all at once. Like when the sun comes over the horizon, hits that, all of that cold water just instantly melts onto that bud and damages it.
Interesting.
So if you plant it so it is shaded in the spring, in the morning, then what's going to happen is that those ice crystals will melt very slowly, and that will help to prevent the damage to those flower buds. You can also just throw a blanket or a towel or something like that over the plant on any night that one of these frosts or freezes threatens. But that's really the only kind of tricky little thing to know about it. If you buy your mom a hanging basket, she can certainly enjoy it as those flowers persist. But once those flowers start to fade in a few weeks, it can just be taken out and planted in the garden.
I really love this plant, and it's exciting. And for folks who are riding in their car or in the yard listening to us, folks listening to the podcast or radio version of this show, just a reminder that this plant's name is Fairy Trail, Trail, not fairy tale, white Cascade hydrangea.
That's right. And it's available at a garden center near you, for you or your mom or anyone who's special in your life. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to be opening up the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends. And no, I am not attempting another greeting variation. Although if you have a suggestion for me, you can certainly leave it as a comment on YouTube. I would be interested to hear it. I'll keep workshopping it and we'll see. Not that I have anything wrong with greetings, gardening friends, but it's just looking for some, exactly, some alternatives, something else. But, we understand that not everybody is actually like a gardener. Some people are interested in plants. They want to be better homeowners. They want to be able to take care of their landscape. They may not.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I always said, hello, entrepreneurs. And that caught a hold.
Yeah. Well, I can't take that. That's yours.
Not for everybody.
Oh, that's your thing.
Yeah, it's mine.
So I need to come up with my thing. So we're working on that. But not everyone considers themselves a gardener. Some people, like I said, are just trying to learn how to better maintain their landscapes, or they're just, curious and want to have more information about plants in their brains for those awkward moments at cocktail parties and the like.
That's why we're here.
So in that case, if you have questions about your garden and things that you should or shouldn't be doing, or plants, you can always reach us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. That is the show website. And my apologies to the person who commented on YouTube that going to our show notes lately has just been a link to the YouTube video. I'm sorry about that. My schedule has been a little hectic, but once things calm down a little bit, I will go back to adding the resources there because we do want those there for you. So, this is the garden industry, so it's a little bit of a little bit of a hectic time for us here.
Prime time right now.
But in any case, you can also go there and email us with your gardening questions. And if you need an urgent answer, since we only do the show once a week, you can also go to provenwinnerscolorchoice.com or provenwinners.com and use the contact form there to reach out, and you will get a personalized answer. Not an AI answer from a bot. You will get an answer from an actual horticulturist who wants you to succeed. And that's one of the things that makes Proven Winners different. So,
and as always, maintain your composter.
See, that's your thing.
Right.
Yeah. All right. I'll keep working on my thing. Maybe when I'm working in the garden this weekend, something will come to me.
Sounds good.
Our first question comes from Randy, and I thought this was a good question. He sent some pictures of his plants. He received an online order of plants, and they were in rough shape, and he was worried about them. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to kind of talk about, for people who do order plants online, kind of what to expect and how to deal with these situations.
Sure.
Now, I love shopping in garden centers, and I think it's important that people realize that for the most part, you're always going to get the best value in plants by shopping at a garden center, because you don't have to worry about shipping, and you're not then paying to have, this giant 3-gallon container, if they indeed even offer a 3-gallon size container, shipped halfway across the country or whatever. Everything's been trucked. It's, locally grown. So you will spend less for a bigger plant in person. But of course, sometimes people want to buy something and their stores don't stock it. And the people can't, the people who own the garden center are unable to source it. So ordering online in those conditions can be a really good alternative. And for the most part, I would say that the majority of online plant nurseries are really good and really reputable. And they want to help. They don't want you to fail. They want to send you a good product. But of course, lots of things can go wrong in between the time it leaves their greenhouse and arrives at your doorstep. And, we've all had packages of things that were less fragile than plants arrive on our doorsteps in less than ideal conditions. So you can imagine if something goes wrong with the plants in the shipping, how they're going to arrive. So I would say, first of all, if you notice something wrong with your plants when they arrive, reach out to the company right away. You don't have to be angry. They're going to want to help you. Take a picture of what you're seeing, or a couple pictures, and immediately reach out to them and just say, hey, this is how my plants arrived. That is really important to document that process. Now, it's very possible, depending on how they look, that the company will tell you to just take a wait and see approach, because very often the plants will recover. I know it's not a great feeling to open up the box that you were so excited to get and the plants don't look amazing. But very often they will recover. They just need some time to kind of recover from that shipping shock, and you can sort of tuck them back into their containers. So they may ask you to wait and see what happens, and, take that with a grain of salt, knowing that they will back up their product, but that you should, give it a chance to see if it will recover. Make sure that you water them right away, unless they are coming out very, very soggy, which is not typically the case, but crazy things do happen. Water them and keep them in a shaded location. This is important because, not only have they been in a protected greenhouse, now they just spent a week or so in a dark box, and now they're in your backyard and they're just like, what in the world is going on here? So you don't want to just expose them right away to bright sunshine. Remove any packaging as you're keeping them, if they're wrapped in plastic or anything like that.
I think that's a key. That's an absolute key. Again, when I was running a garden center, we'd get a lot of plants in boxes, primarily tropical plants. When we get them in, we always had box cutters in our pockets, because the shrink wrap comes off the pallet right away. You get the boxes out of the sun. And also, if you can't get to the plants right away, just cut open the tops and let them air out.
Yeah, that's the bare minimum that you should do, is just make sure they're getting air. And then again, keep them in the shade, because they've just been in this dark box. And they're going to need to acclimate back to sun, even if they're full sun plants, gradually. So give them a few days in the shade to kind of recover. And one last tip here. If the plants that you purchase have colorful foliage, like purple foliage or yellow foliage or something like that, and the plant arrives green, don't be shocked. They most likely did not send the wrong plant, although it's always worth asking. But a lot of these plants either don't develop good leaf color in the greenhouse environment, or they developed it fine in the greenhouse environment, but they lost it being in a dark box for a few days. So we see this a lot with our black lace elderberry. I'll tell you, if there is one plant that people order by mail order that they've written me about and said, I don't know what to do, this plant doesn't look any good, it is probably black lace elderberry. This plant does not enjoy being in a dark box. And it shows that by turning green instead of the dark purple that it actually will be in the garden. So, don't panic if you see that. You can certainly let the company know just in case there was a mix up, and they will note that in the order. But for the most part, they just need a few days to acclimate, get out into the sun, and they will take on the color and be everything that you dreamed of.
Agree.
So just a couple tips there from people who are looking at purchasing plants online.
Stacy Valerie writes to us, I have a perfect storm that I want to transplant. I'm in zone 5B. Should I transplant now or wait until I see growth showing, which is typically the beginning of June? So perfect storm, Stacy, I'm thinking we're talking about summerific hibiscus?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, and if that's the case, my personal opinion, because it's a late bloomer, do it now.
Absolutely do it now. This plant will be so much happier if you do the transplanting while it is dormant and not once it starts growing. Because once this plant starts growing, and just a reminder to anyone who has the summerific or any other perennial hibiscus in their garden, these are absolutely hands down the last plant to emerge in spring. No matter where you are, they emerge later than anything else. They are like waiting to cross the finish line until the very last minute. So, and so once that growth comes out, usually for us in Michigan here, it's probably Memorial Day weekend, I found for my summerifics.
Yep.
Once that happens, that growth is going to be very delicate. The way that it comes out of the root mass or the crown of the plant, very easy to damage that. And if you were to damage that growth in the transplanting process, it may not be able to put out more growth that season. And whether or not it can survive that really depends, because then it won't have the benefit of photosynthesizing all summer long to do that. Overall, I have transplanted summerific hibiscus a lot in my time. I mean, I have transplanted more than my share of them just because, I change my mind about colors.
Sure.
I have a lot of them. And they are actually very amenable to transplanting. And even if you accidentally cause quite a lot of damage to their roots, and their roots are really thick. They're almost like woody roots. They're not really fleshy roots. They're very fibrous. But even if you cause some damage and you break them apart a little bit, or, lose a big chunk of it, the plant can recover. It may or may not flower, or it may flower less as it's trying to recover from that substantial root loss. But overall, I feel like these plants are very, very amenable to transplanting. The trick that I have found is, especially if you do a good job at digging up the root ball, which you should attempt to do if at all possible, trying to fit that into the new hole is not an easy task. Because they're growing all over the place, and you got to position them, and you got to put a little more soil on this side so that you kind of even out what's going on this side. So they take a little bit of a steady hand to figure out exactly how you're going to get them in there. But if you just put the extra soil in, a container or a tub or something so that you can kind of use it to maneuver the plant in. Overall, I have found, knock on wood, but I haven't lost any to transplanting.
I haven't either. And you're looking at a tough native plant is what
Yes.
you're looking at. And, the old approach also of trying to move a plant when it's dormant is probably the best rule to stick by.
Absolutely.
And again, because it's going to be blooming in August, probably in zone 5B, doing it now, I think is the time to do it.
Yeah, and like I said, you may have fewer flowers, but you are likely to still have some. But yeah, once that growth comes out, this job is going to be infinitely more tricky and complicated. So do it now, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy some great flowers in its new home this summer. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to be sharing some favorite hanging basket plants as well as talking tulips. So please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. We'll continue our talk on hanging baskets today, but prior to that, Stacy, I wanted to mention here in West Michigan, it's tulip time. And of course, my parents were from the Netherlands, so I'm kind of into tulips. I went out the other day, shot some pictures. We'll show our viewers on YouTube. Also posted some stuff in social media, and I was surprised at the number of people who reached out to me and said, that tulip is incredible. What is that? It was a frilly type of tulip that had the green streaks and multicolors in it. And I said, well, that's a parrot tulip. And they're like, what's a parrot tulip? And then I realized a lot of people do not know that tulips basically are in different classifications. So there's all sorts of cultivars and hybrid tulips with registered names, but they organize these tulips into groups by shape, heritage, and flowering time. And I thought I'd take 1 minute just to share with you that there are many different types. For example, there are single early tulips, which are perfect for forcing in pots. Double early tulips that almost resemble peonies. Triumph tulips, which are a mid-season cross of early and late. Darwin hybrids, which have a big traditional look, single lates that are very elegant. And then you get into some of these interesting tulips, lily flowering that have this flared lily look to them, fringed, crimped, wildly cut, feathery. Virid flora, which have the green streaks in them from base to tip. The Rembrandt tulips, I mentioned the parrot tulips, the double lates, the Kaufmania tulips, petite, very early flowering. All of these are amazing. I love the Fosteriana tulips. Red Emperor is one, very large flowers, but short plants, 10 to 16 inches. Gregii tulips, distinctive mottled foliage, very short but big blooms on them. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that not all tulips are created the same, and when you buy them in fall and put them in the ground, do a little bit of research and look, because fringed or lily or parrot tulips are sensational when they bloom in spring.
Yes, I agree. And those parrot tulips or Rembrandt tulips are the ones that are modern hybrids or attempts to recreate the classic broken color tulips that caused infamous tulip mania.
1600s.
That was actually caused by a virus, which was why the tulip bubble burst.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about that. Don't cause a tulip bubble. But you don't have to worry about that with these, because these are actually stable hybrids that were not caused by a virus. They're just an attempt to bring back that cool old look. And I think this is an important thing to mention because, being tulip time out here in West Michigan, a lot of people will see the city of Holland plants all of these tulips. So they have that really long season of bloom. And so those early start blooming and everyone says, oh my gosh, is tulip time ruined? All the tulips are blooming now. No, they're not. That's just the early tulips, but they really do include all of these different groups so that you have that perpetual, ongoing show of flowers that bloom at different times. And, if you're shopping just at like a local, box store or even a garden center, you're not likely to get that much detail on what type you're buying. Like it might say that it's a Darwin hybrid or something like that, but for the most part, it'll just say like, Red Emperor or what, it'll just have the variety name. Right. So if you want that extra information, it does pay to do some research and, order online. A lot of bulb suppliers that you can order online from will offer a discount. If you buy in spring and reserve your plants to be shipped, the bulbs will be shipped in fall.
That's smart.
So that's a great way to get really, really cool tulips that your neighbors are not going to have. But you have tulips. Mm-hmm. They've got to be in your deer compound.
They're in the compound because deer, it's candy to deer.
Yes. Now I have not. I have attempted to grow tulips before the full realization of how bad my deer issue was apparent. And I have, this is funny, sort of, except I'm probably jinxing myself. I have a couple of small plantings of species tulips up against a fence that I don't think they can get their little deer noses down there because there's like a 3-inch space between like my driveway and the neighbor's fence. So I kind of try to use that to get a little stand of some species tulips, because species tulips are my favorite.
Yeah, and species tulips, you could say, are the originals, and they reliably come back year after year, arguably better than, let's say, some of the hybridized varieties. And there's all other sorts of issues like planting depth and that type of thing. I won't get into that today. Just the main point here is to understand that there's roughly about 15 different categories or groups, and get to know those groups, because I think it will cause enjoyment for you in years to come. As far as
and you can use the City of Holland approach to having tulips in bloom for 3 or 4 weeks instead of just one big show.
Like I always say, if you've got questions on bulbs because of that Dutch European blood running through my veins, just use your tulips and speak to me, and I'll try to help you out. Okay, Stacy, back to hanging baskets. I was thinking the other day, working in the greenhouse, I know you like browelia.
Oh, yeah, I love that plant.
Like Endless Flirtation, Endless Illumination are proven winners varieties. So I was looking at the hanging baskets thinking, you're probably a person that likes Streptocarpella.
I do like it. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very interesting plant. And that's one that I feel like a lot of people know as a house plant, but you do find it as a hanging basket because the flowers come out on these long, thin stems and kind of give it that really cool halo look.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then, of course, also walking through the greenhouse, I look at these plants that I call trigger plants. So in some combinations, there's Bacopa. Or, for example, Tradescantia bridal veil, which is an old-fashioned plant. Once again, some people view it as a house plant, but we do sell a lot of those in the spring. These are what I call trigger plants. In other words, you can see at a glance whether or not the basket needs water. So always have some trigger plants in your landscape. Of course, Boston ferns are a classic, especially if you've got a shady porch. Mini Vista supertunias, any of the supertunias do fantastic in hanging baskets. Stacy, I can't help it, but I'm a huge fan of superbenas.
Yep.
I think perfect for hanging baskets. Silver Falls dichondra.
Oh, love that.
Trailing out of the basket.
Yeah, a lot of places will do those like in the very bottom so they look like a jellyfish.
Oh.
You ever see that? Like where they got all the puffy flowers on top and then the dichondra coming out the bottom?
That is
kind of a fun look.
That is a fun look. Lamium, which is a perennial ground cover. The lobelias are just so beautiful, and proven winners has the Laguna Ultraviolet, the dark blue, the Royal Lilac, the Royal Pink. Love those.
And, I would add to that, this is another area where choosing the proven winners variety is going to be really important because older and more conventional lobelias do not hold up to the heat, even like Michigan heat. When we don't usually get super hot summers, they'll just fry and they'll stop blooming, whereas the proven winners lobelia are all tested to keep blooming in the heat. So they might need some shade when it's really hot. And if you live in a hot climate, they're definitely going to need some shade, but that's one area where you can count on a better performance than your standard lobelia.
Absolutely. The genetics, they're amazing. So you would look for Laguna lobelias. Stacy, in some of the hanging baskets, we have mandavillas, which may seem crazy, and they go nuts and they vine up all the way up and all over the place, but it is a fun thing to grow in a hanging basket.
I'm crazy about the mandavillas. I love them. I have not grown a hanging basket, but I love to put them on a trellis and get that look.
I mentioned in the first segment, of course, fuchsias and begonias, just a favorite of mine, tuberous begonias. But I wonder if have you ever grown the small leaf creeping wire type vine?
Carokia?
No, it's, I'm going to take a shot at this. Muhlenbeckia.
Oh, Muhlenbeckia, yeah.
Muhlenbeckia.
I have not grown it as a hanging basket, but I've definitely grown it as a houseplant and as a topiary.
Okay.
But very pretty. I love that plant. It's just got such a beautiful, delicate look.
Interesting approach to baskets or containers, Plectranthus. I love Plectranthus, and there's a variety called guacamole that I love. Fantastic. And then Thunbergia, or people would refer to it as black-eyed Susan. Proven Winners has lemon, apple, coconut, orange, tangerine. Again, using vines in hanging baskets can really add some cool dimension to your basket, your arrangement.
Yeah, and some of them, like you said about the mandevilla, they do want to grow up. So instead of cascading down like you might envision, they will kind of find each other, their fellow vines, and twist all together and go up. But that can be kind of a fun look, and I think that's especially nice. It all depends on where your hanging basket situation is. If you have it on a lower hook, then letting those vines grow up on the hangers could actually look really, really nice.
You bet. So I'd encourage the use of vines also in hanging baskets. End of the season, I clean out my hanging baskets, and then it's fun to watch as we approach winter. The squirrels use them as a porch swing. They sit in the baskets and just kind of swing in the breeze.
That's so cute.
Yeah, it is cute. Cute, lovable little fuzzy
I love squirrels.
I do too.
They're amazing. I'll tell you, if squirrels were not everywhere and they were just like on social media, people watching videos, they would go crazy for them. They would visit zoos to see them.
Yes.
But because they're everywhere, people just kind of go, it's a squirrel.
Very true.
Just saying. And on that note, just one for the squirrels there. Happy Mother's Day to you and to all of the moms and mom figures out there. And thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you to Adriana. And thank you all so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week.